Hello everybody, this is Danny from Deep South Homestead. I've been asked to do a particular video, and we're going to try to do this video about our cellar. Back when I built this cellar, we was not doing YouTube or anything like that, and I only took a very minimal amount of pictures of it. So I'm basically going to have to do some talking, and I'll show you a few pictures that I have of it. I just understand that I didn't video the process. I didn't take a lot of pictures, but nevertheless, let's talk about this thing. After Hurricane Katrina, the devastation here was so bad. There had never been a hurricane in the history of America like this one was, and I lived through it. I didn't leave. I was here when it came through. And guys, I'm going to tell you, that was the worst devastation I've ever seen. I've seen Camille come through. I lived through a lot of other ones here, multiple ones. But there was nothing like Katrina. In a 150-foot radius around my house, I had over 300 trees blowed down that were probably 10 to 20 inches in diameter. God was good to me. Not a one of them hit my house. Because when I built my house, literally all I did was went into the forest and I cut out just enough trees to get the foundation of this house in, and the rest of them stayed, and the sun never hit the ground here. So once Katrina came through and blowed all this timber down, I quickly realized that life was changing in this country. The things that I had been trying to tell people for years about God's hand being lifted from this country was beginning to come to fruition. And since then, we've had multiple hurricanes that's done massive amounts of damage in this country. And experiencing what I experienced during Hurricane Katrina, if you left, you were not allowed to come back home. So you could not get into, if you had animals, if you had anything here, you could not come back to your house. You were stopped on the roads, and there was no electricity here for 26 days where I live at. There was no gas anywhere to be found. You usually had to drive to the North Mississippi or to another state to actually get gas. And if you was lucky, you could get back with it without having the National Guard stop you and or have someone run the risk of holding you at gunpoint on the road and taking it away from you or whatever, when it finally got where you could travel a little bit. But this, guys, was an eye-opener for me. And you have to understand, I've been through many hurricanes, but never nothing like this. There was no food, no gas, no electricity for 20-something days. If you didn't have stuff, I mean, Red Cross came in and stuff like that. But guys, this was an eye-opener. Let me just stop at that and say this was an eye-opener. This what made me make a decision. I've got to have somewhere in case the weather gets bad. Now, we've had tornadoes here, and, I've had them go right over the top of this house. I've had trees tore down here from tornadoes and stuff like that. So, not only because of a hurricane, but this is just a good place to be. We needed food storage place and stuff, so I decided to build a root cellar to compensate for all of these things. Now, right beside my house here was a steep hillside, and you would never know what anything looked like now because I didn't take pictures back then, and I really should have, I guess. But when you walk out the side of my house here, there's a concrete sidewalk that walks out onto a carport. Well, that carport originally had 6 flights of steps going down to where you park the car at because it was a steep hillside there. And after Katrina, I decided that I needed to build me a storm cellar. So I brought in a big giant track hoe and decided I was going to dig this hillside out here next to the side of my house. And that's what we did. We dug this thing down to where if I put a carport there, that the top of the cellar would be 3 feet of dirt on top of it below the carport. So it's pretty deep underground. And I dug so deep in the ground here, our water table is like somewhere between 10 and 15 feet. When I got down to the bottom of where I wanted the floor at in my cellar, which I think you can see in some of the pictures here, I show a hole. I took a post hole digger and decided I need to dig down and see how far from water I was. Well, I dug down 4 more foot deep with a post hole digger and I hit water. Water started filling the hole up. So I knew that I really couldn't go any deeper than what I was there. And I set a transit up and shot the bottom of the hole in this cellar that I had dug. And I shot the hillside and realized I was going to have to run a drain line a minimum of 125 to 150 feet down the hill from this cellar in order to be able to have a drain tile level with the bottom of the cellar to get the water out in the event that water ever got in there, to keep it completely dry. So once I got the hole dug, I came in and decided what I wanted the cellar to look like. I wanted living quarters in it of 12 feet by 12 feet with a sink and stuff in it. And then I wanted an 8 by 12 section onto one end of it for canned goods to go in. Well, once I figured out that I had a 12 by 12 and then I had an 8 by 12, I figured the square footage and I figured out how much ventilation it would take coming into the cellar and how much ventilation it would take going out of the cellar in order for it to function properly. So on an 8 by 12, a 4-inch inlet coming in and a 4-inch outlet going out was sufficient. But on the 12 by 12, I had to have what they called, I needed a 6-inch pipe coming in and a 6-inch pipe going out, but because I didn't have the 6-inch, I used 2 4-inches coming in and 2 4-inch ones going out, and they worked fine. Now there's some rules when installing ventilation in a cellar like this. The pipes coming in must come in and go within 5.5 inches of the floor, so that the cool air coming in goes all the way to the floor. Now the pipes going out must be flush with the ceiling in the cellar. If they're sticking down 1/4 inch on the inside of the cellar ceiling, then they will sweat around it and have water forming there because of the contrast in air temperature as the air travels out. So therefore, the outlet pipe must be at least level with the top of the ceiling. It must be flush. It can't stick down. It can protrude up in it, but it just can't stick below it any. And that's what I did once I figured the ventilation out on it. And they need to be on opposite walls on each side of the cellar. The air needs to come in on one side of the cellar wall and go out on the other side. The air in and the air out cannot be on the same side of the cellar wall. They must be on opposite sides from one another. Now, that can be accomplished like mine. I ran the 4-inch pipe through the ceiling on the top and came down on the other side to bring air in, and you know, just so that the air in and the air out is on opposite walls from one another, I guess is the easiest way to say that. Well, I had several options when I went to build this cellar. I could have built it out of concrete. I could have put forms up and poured concrete. I could have done the ICF blocks. I could have done regular concrete blocks and put rebar in them and filled them with concrete. But a lot of the new research I was doing showed using treated material. So treated material is what I decided to go with. Now I did pour a 4-inch thick slab with footings all the way around it in the bottom of the hole that I dug in the ground for the foundation for this cellar. And I also put 4x6s down in the ground and put rebar, the footing, rebar footings that I put in. The rebar that went through the footings ran also, I drilled holes through the post and also ran them through the 4x6 post that I put in the walls. To me, this was just added strength and support on the sides of the walls to keep the dirt from pushing in, so that, to me, I just needed that guarantee. There was nothing that said I had to do that. I put anchor bolts every 1 foot apart and the concrete slab around it, and poured the concrete, put a nice finish on it, and before I ever started standing any walls in the cellar or anything like that, I dug down on the outside of the slab about 12 inches deep around the slab, and I filled it full of washed gravel. and put French drains in all the way around the cellar on the outside. Because what I did was I dug the hole 3 feet wider than my cellar was all the way around it. That way I had room that once I stood the walls up, I had 3 feet I could walk around the outside of my cellar around the walls in it in order to work on the outside of the walls and not just be scrunched up against the dirt in case there was a cave-in or anything like that. I have plenty of room. And then this 3 feet is what I dug and put the French drain system in so that it would be level with where I come out on the bottom of the hill at. And once I got that done, I covered it up with felt, tar paper, whatever you want to call it, so that I wouldn't get any dirt in it while I was working, and if it rained, dirt wouldn't wash in it or anything like that. And then I proceeded to use 2x8 treated boards, 8 foot long. I made the ceilings 8 feet high in it. And I put 2x8s every 1 foot on center, all the way around it. And put double 2x8s on top for my top plates. And then I came back with 2x12s on the top of it and put them on, and put 3/4 inch plywood on top of the 2x12s that I put. Now the 2x12s were 1 foot on center also. The 2x12s sit directly over the studs in the walls. When I laid the studs in the walls out, I laid them out exactly the same on each side going down through the walls, so when I put my ceiling joists up for the top, then they were sitting directly over the stud. They were never in between the studs on just the plates. That way they would carry the load of whatever I put on top of them. Now once I got all my 2x12s put on the top, I went and bought Hurricane, they call them Y clips. They're kind of in the shape of a Y. They nail on each side of the rafter, and they nail to the plate on the top, and I put them on every one of those 2x12s I put up from my roof. In the event that the walls ever tried to give or anything like that, or everything tried to move, those Hurricane clips had every one of them on the end where it couldn't move. And like I said, once I got through with that, I put 3/4 inch plywood on top of it, and I put 3/4 plywood on the walls around it. And once I had all the plywood around it and the plywood on top of it, I came back with heavy roofing tar and started at the ground, and I coated this thing with heavy roofing tar all the way up and over the top. I coated the whole thing in roofing tar to kind of help with the waterproofing of it. And I did make some mistakes that I wish I would have gone back and redone, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But once I did that, then I came in with 4mm plastic, and I put a sheet, I used black 4mm plastic and put over the top of the cellar and let it drape all the way down to the ground. Well, let me back up. I put 4mm plastic over the top of I took the tar paper up that I had over the top of the rocks and the French drain and keeping the dirt out. I took that up and I put the 4mm plastic, I let it run about halfway out on my rocks, and I came up the walls. I came up 4 feet high, and I cut it off all the way around the building. I did that all the way around it. And then I came back with another roll of 4mm plastic. Now I bought a sheet big enough that I could cover the whole root cellar and not have to have a seam in it anywhere. I think it was like 40-something feet wide and 100-foot long roll. And I put it completely over it and let it drape all the way down again over the 4mm I had just put up 4 feet high from the bottom. I let it drape down over it again and run out to the center of the rocks on each side and cut it. And then I began to backfill it. Now I backfilled about halfway up, I'm going to say 4 feet up, I backfilled all of it. And I wet it in good and let the dirt settle real good. Then I came in with another layer of rocks and another French drain system and put it in 4 feet from the top and ran it around, and where the one at the bottom ran out down the hill, the second line of French drains, when I run it around halfway around the cellar, the height of the cellar, I brought that one down the hill and tied it in to the one at the very bottom with a Y system in the French drain. And then I finished backfilling my cellar everywhere except the side that I wanted to put the steps going in for the door. That side, I went ahead and set my 4x6s in the ground and my lumber and plywood and everything, and I built a doorway system with steps climbing out the side of the cellar. And you'll see this in some of the pictures where I'm talking about, because it's really hard to explain how I did some of it. But where I made my mistake, guys, is I should have took 1.5 inch rigid styrofoam and put around the plastic on the outside of it before I put the dirt up against it. That would have helped insulate it a lot better than what I did. And even over the top of it, because see, I just put dirt right over the top of it when I had the plastic on it. I should have put the styrofoam on top of it. That would have really helped to insulate it and control the temperature better, but I didn't do it. Didn't think about it at the time, and didn't have the money really, because we were trying to get this thing done as cheaply as possible. But once we got the dirt on the top of it and I got the stairwell system built into it, then I built me 2 storm cellar doors that kind of open, both of them open up from the outside. And once we got inside it, I went back and put 4 mil plastic. I didn't insulate the walls because I wanted the temperature from the ground to actually cool the cellar down. And everything I had been taught was that anything deep underground stays about 55 or 60 degrees. Well, here in the Deep South, you will soon figure out that that's not necessarily the truth. So I went back and I took 4 mil plastic on the inside, the 2x8 studs on the inside of it, and I tacked it up all the way around it and created a vapor barrier around the whole inside of the cellar, so you could not see the studs. When you went in, all you saw was just black plastic everywhere, except the ceiling. I did not do it on the ceiling, because the ceiling I wanted to insulate before I actually put anything up there. Well, once I got the black plastic on, I was trying to determine what did I want to go on the walls on the inside of it. Well, after Katrina, I had so much lumber cut up that I had just thousands and thousands of feet of 1x8 poplar and stuff like that, 1x6s and stuff. So I decided to just put the poplar on the walls on the inside of it. So I went back and I nailed up all the 1x8 and 1x6 poplar on the walls on the inside of it and got most of it finished. I hadn't quite finished all of it just yet. I wanted to make sure I got the part where the canning supplies went finished, the 6x12 part of it. I wanted to make sure I got that part finished and got shelving in for our canned goods. Now I put insulation in the ceiling of that part. I put wafer board in it, and I also put electricity down in there in the event that I would keep electricity in the cellar as long as I had it. And that's what we have. We have one fluorescent light in each room. We have several plug-ins in there, 16 inches off the floor. It's built just like a conventional house on the inside. Just like building the basement of a house, basically, with treated material. And one thing about putting the plastic up, because we were a little bit concerned about the off-gassing of the treated material, but putting the plastic up as a vapor barrier has prevented that from happening. We've had no outgassing of any time that we're aware of, and then the ventilation has taken anything out of there because it works perfectly fine. The only problem that we really ran into with this particular design of the cellar is that I put 3 feet of dirt on top of it, and then I put a concrete slab on top of it because I was originally going to build me a building up there, and never have had the money since I put the slab up there to actually build the building. And what has happened is during the summertime, the sun heats that concrete up. And as long as we have down here of heat, because there was one year there we had 100 days that it was over 100 degrees. Now this is 100 days in a row. So the concrete slab never really had a chance to cool off. And what happens is geothermal heating starts to happen. It's kind of like a rocket mass heater or anything else like that. When you've got that huge concrete mass up there staying that hot and it's radiating heat down into the ground, because I didn't put any styrofoam over the top of my cellar, a lot of times our cellar will get up to 75 degrees even in the summertime, because you've got air temperature outside. The ambient temperature will be over 100 degrees, and your ventilation is constantly working with sucking air in and air going out because of just the way it's designed. And you're sucking in temperatures into the cellar that's over 100 degrees with relative humidity of 90-something%. What happens is you get a lot of humidity in the cellar that can't get out, and the heat that is dragging in, because the ground temperature is naturally cool, it creates that vortex of airflow in there. So you're pulling in hot air during the summer months and expelling, some of your cool air out, and the heat overrides the cool. So the cellar heats up to about 75. I have had it to get up to almost 80 degrees on long summers in there. So the fact that I didn't insulate the top of it with styrofoam, which was a mistake, and the second mistake was putting a concrete slab over the top of it and not going ahead and getting a building over it where it would stay in the shade all the time. Because I really believe if we had a building over the top and had the concrete slab shaded, then the ambient temperature inside the cellar would probably stay pretty comfortable. But now we have had a couple of times had to put a dehumidifier in our cellar, because the humidity would just be bad down there, because the humidity outside was bad, and you're pulling that into a cellar, there's nowhere for it to go. But as time would go on, we put our canned stuff in there, and then we started having, about 2 hours from us here, we started having some mini earthquakes in a community 2 hours north of me here. And it got Wanda and I to thinking, we've got all this canned stuff just sitting on shelves in there. What if we had an earthquake and all this stuff kind of just started falling off the shelves into the floor, busting? All of our hard work would be, would be in naught. We went into the cellar, and I actually put 1x4s up in front of the shelves in the event that the ground was to start rumbling or something other, that at least they wouldn't fall off of the shelves. Now some of them bump up against each other and crack, but at least they won't fall off of the shelves in the cellar and bust. We won't lose everything, I guess you might say. So that's why we come up with this particular design of shelving like we did. Now we've even gone back and took some of our old socks and cut them off and slid them around jars. We put some rubber bands around jars. We've done things so that they vibrate against one another. It's not just glass against glass, to kind of help alleviate some of the issues should it happen. So guys, the pictures that I've been showing you here, what few we took, I hope that they'll help you out a little bit. And you have to understand, where I live at, it's just pure sand. Now we do have some red clay here in spots, and there's places that I dug out in the hillside where the cellar was at that there was some red clay, but there was predominantly it was just white sand and rocks and stuff like that in the ground. So water staying in the ground, I guess you might say, is not a big issue here, because it just goes through the dirt so fast because it's all sand. And then where we tied our Ys together, where we put our 2 French drains in, I took a backhoe and I dug a trench all the way down the hill level, or a little bit off level from the bottom of the cellar, so that any water that ever got in those French drains, when it hit them, what didn't go in the ground would take off through the pipe and actually come out at the bottom of the hill down there. And I put a screen over the end of the pipe at the bottom of the hill to keep rats and anything else from getting up in there. So guys, I guess that's about it on the cellar as far as explaining to you about what I did. Now as far as the quart jars, the shelves, some people have asked how far apart did you put the shelves. Basically I just stood a quart jar up and added 4 more inches to the top of it. And that's how high I made my shelves in my cellar, because I felt like that would give me enough room when I pick a jar up to turn it and come out over the 1x4 edge on it. And it has worked perfect. Now, the only thing is you cannot stack 2 pints on top of each other in there, because it's just not enough room. I didn't see any need to fix it where I could stack jars on top of one another. I feel like that might damage the lids on them. And to deal with some of the moisture issues that we have had in our cellar here in the Deep South, I will say this. We contacted the Ball Book Company to ask them, because we did have some rust beginning to form on the gold colored lids. So since then we no longer use the gold colored lids. We only use the silver colored lids as recommended by Ball. And we wax a lot of our lids. We waxed because a lot of them were down there for years and years, because we just didn't get a chance to eat all of our food. And Ball suggested that we take the Gulf wax and take a little small crock pot like you do potpourri or something in, and melt those bars of Gulf wax and take your rings off and turn your jar upside down and wax the top of that lid, so that when you set it in a cellar, the moisture cannot get to the lid to actually begin rusting it, because it's completely coated in wax. So that was one of the suggestions from Ball about that. But as far as I know, if you have any specific questions, I don't have a drawing of it up yet. I have some that I've been working on, showing exactly how I built it, but I haven't quite got them yet. Maybe in the near future, when I get time, I'll be able to get those up. But guys, I mean, you can use the ICF blocks to build your cellar out of. You can use regular concrete blocks with rebar in them. Just make sure if you use concrete blocks that you do fill them with concrete with rebar in them, or else the ground will shove the blocks in and crush it when you go to put the dirt in on the sides, because when the dirt gets wet, it really gets heavy and it really pushes in hard on the walls of the cellar. That's why I put 4x6s inside the concrete slab in every wall, so that should the dirt get to be pushing too hard, even on the 2x8s, then from the sides, at least they wouldn't collapse on me or something, like, because it had those big timbers in the wall. And so far, I've had absolutely zero problems with any of it. It seems to all work fine. Now, I did not put a drain in the floor of the cellar, simply because I've got the French drains around the outside of the cellar, and they have always taken any water that got in the ground out. We've never had another problem with water in the cellar at all of any kind. I'm just trying to sit here and think if there's anything else that I might mention to y'all. I can't really think of anything right offhand. But if you have any comments or any questions, maybe something that you have a question about that maybe I missed, then, you know, in the section down below where the comments and questions are, leave me something over there, and I'll get to it and answer it the best of my ability. But this is basically how I built my cellar here in the Deep South, and it has worked fine for me ever since. I've had absolutely no problems with it whatsoever. So I hope this has been educational and that you've enjoyed it. And like I said, if you have a question, leave it down below, and I'll do the best I can to get it answered. So thank you from Deep South Homestead.